celebrating a decade of achievement. This is CNN.
Live from the world's financial capital, New York City, this is Moneyline with Lou Dobbs.
Good evening, I'm Jan Hopkins sitting in for Lou Dobbs. The great debate over the so-called credit crunch was replayed today in Congress. Federal banking regulators tried again to calm the business community's concern about a possible cutback in lending. Federal Reserve Board Chairman Alan Greenspan told Congress there is no evidence of a nationwide credit crunch. Cynthia Rogers reports from Washington.
Top banking regulators agree tougher lending standards are hurting some borrowers, but they applaud the banks for correcting practices they say were too lax.
We haven't told bankers, don't make loans. We reminded them to take care in making loans.
Because of weakening real estate markets, especially in the Northeast, regulators have forced banks to increase reserves for loan losses. The chairman of the Federal Reserve Board says some bankers may be overreacting by clamping down on lending, but he says there isn't a nationwide credit crunch.
Whatever overreaction that may have occurred does not appear to have been widespread, and access to credit has not been reduced to an extent that has had a significant dampening influence on the American economy overall.
But in written comments to the Senate Banking Committee, Commerce Secretary Robert Mosbacher said his personal view is that there is a credit crunch that appears to be national in scope. Lawmakers say they've been flooded with complaints from small and medium businesses who aren't able to get credit.
We can't understand why all of a sudden a loan that was good for so many years is not good anymore.
A survey by Maeslish's group found construction for new shopping malls is down 25% from a year ago because of stiffer bank loan requirements. The Fed chairman says he's well aware that a bank crackdown on credit could threaten the economic expansion, but he reassured Congress he's watching closely for signs of any drastic tightening. Cynthia Rogers, CNN Business News, Washington.
Fed Chairman Greenspan today also talked about the economy in general. Greenspan repeated his opinion that economic growth is slow, but he did hint the Fed is becoming more concerned about that slowdown. Statistics show that economic growth may not be so slow after all. The government today raised its estimate of the gross national product during the first quarter of this year. The GNP grew at a rate of 1.9% during the period. Strong exports accounted for most of the increase. Inflation, however, slowed a bit. An inflation gauge linked with GNP was lowered to a 5.4% annual rate. An inflated budget deficit in May. The government today said it spent $42.5 billion more than it collected last month. Spending on the savings and loan bailout was about 17% of that deficit. The budget deficit is running about 40% higher than last year. The May budget deficit was higher than expected, but it failed to undermine stocks and bonds. The Treasury's benchmark 30-year bond rose in price for the first time in 5 days. The long bond lost almost 2 points before the 10/30 seconds gain. The yield dipped to 8.48%. Lower interest rates and computer buy programs today lifted the Dow Industrials to the 8th highest close on record. The Dow rose about 6.5 points to close above the 2,900 mark again. The blue chip average has risen 3 days in a row since Monday's huge sell-off. The Dow's 5% spurt this year turned Wall Street's bulls to bears. Naysayers outnumbered the bulls 2-1 in February. The most recent survey of investment strategists has the bulls ahead, 46% to 44%. But some firms are changing asset allocations to reflect new concerns about the economy. Today, Argus Research recommended a defensive stance toward stocks. The firm says interest rates will stay high and corporate earnings will move lower.
At the end of the quarter, I think we're going to get into a period of looking again at earnings, and earnings aren't going to be very good, and interest rates are going to not be going down. So I would think that stocks are going to be pretty weak during July.
Argus is trimming its equities investments by 10% to 60% stocks, 40% cash. 2 airlines showing interest in bankrupt Eastern Airlines. The company today confirming it's been approached by Pan Am and Northwest Airlines. Dan Gifford reports from New York.
Eastern Airlines is bankrupt. Pan Am could be on the verge of bankruptcy. Northwest is doing well but has loads of debt. None will say whether they're talking about anything. But one airline expert says rumors about Eastern being for sale are on the money.
100% believable. Believe me, it's for sale. The unsecured creditors would like to get as much money as they can for the debt Eastern owes. And if this would increase the amount of money they'd realize from the debt, that's why they'd like it.
Eastern has valuable assets, but only to the right party.
The routes of Eastern are only attractive to certain airlines that don't have a position in the Southeast. Those airlines are airlines like Northwest Airlines, airlines like Pan Am, even TWA, and maybe even United Airlines.
Eastern's 45 gates at Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport are the only entree for sale and could be worth as much as $500 million. Eastern also has cash, $800 million now, and an estimated $1.1 billion once the sale of its South American routes is completed. Pan Am couldn't afford that, most analysts say. The airline is a wounded duck with an unfunded pension liability per share almost twice its market price. But Northwest probably could raise the money for Eastern's assets. Northwest went private last year after being bought for more than $3.5 billion, almost all of it borrowed money. The company still owes $2.1 billion, but is making money. Many believe lenders wouldn't have a problem with an expansion loan. Deal or not, Eastern's latest ad campaign could be prophetic.
For the next 100 days, you're going to see Eastern Airlines get a little bit better every day. So
Dan Gifford, CNN Business News, New York.
More money and more time for Pathé Communications' buyout offer for MGM-UA. The two companies late today said they reached a new agreement on the deal. Pathé raised its bid 50 cents a share to $21.50. The new bid is worth about $1.33 billion. The old deal was supposed to be closed by Saturday. Pathé now has until July to make its first payments. MGM-UA said Time Warner is not part of this deal. Time Warner had agreed to provide $650 million to finance the deal for Pathé, but Pathé says it's still talking to Time Warner. When Moneyline continues, the man who led the financial rescue of New York City has a plan for the whole country. Felix Rohatyn when we continue.
Investors, Quick & Riley, a major discount broker, would like to give you this unique dividend study. It pinpoints over 200 big board stocks which have increased dividends every year for 10 years. Many show increases of 500% or more. To get your free dividend study, just fill out a Quick & Riley application. We offer huge commission savings plus one-on-one personal service coast to coast. Call 800-284-9163. No salesperson will phone. 800-284-9163. Call now.
He was my boss and he was my father. Philosophy and theology and music were his great interests, and medicine would lead him to what he wanted to do.
Many skills combine to make Albert Schweitzer's greatness. That's the vision of Bell South, a network of companies working together to help businesses communicate better. Bell South. Everything you expect from a leader.
Set your clock. Mark your calendar. Leave yourself a reminder not to miss Goodyear's famous name closeout. Get savings from 20 to 33%. Save on Vector, Goodyear's famous third-generation all-season radio. Or on custom polysteel, the famous wet traction radio. Savings good while supplies last. When they're gone, they're gone. So don't miss out. See your participating Goodyear retailer for super savings on Goodyear's famous name closeout.
Harriet and Bill asked us to dinner next Thursday, but you have to work. They said Friday, but you have to work. Saturday, but you have to work. And Harriet and Bill said, what is it with this guy? Oh.
Konica copiers, they just work all the time.
Tonight, flag burning, two live crew, Donald Trump, Barney Frank, and more have the nation's two opposing radio personalities slugging it out. Rush Limbaugh and Bob Lassiter in CNN's Crossfire, 7:30 Eastern tonight.
When New York City faced financial ruin in the 1970s, Felix Rohatyn, investment banker and partner at Lazard Frères, helped put the city back on its fiscal feet. The problems the federal government faces are even bigger: the budget deficit, the savings and loan disaster. Felix Rohatyn joins us with some ideas on how to deal with it all. Big problems. What do you see as the biggest problem that's facing the country at this point?
Well, I would say the biggest problems facing the country are how to maintain a position as a leading world power, both in the financial and the industrial sense.